Welcome to a Twist Podcast exclusive. Bonus interviews where hosts Rick and Mark have intimate conversations with people you're sure to find as interesting as we do. Fasten your headphones and let's hit play.
Welcome to a bonus interview for the Twist Podcast. Today, I'm really happy to have on someone who has become a friend. At least 8 years, I know, because I was looking at my back catalog with audiobooks. It's audiobook extraordinaire Daniela Acitelli, who lives in London. Daniela, how are you?
I'm doing wonderfully, thank you. I feel like you're one of those friends that I've known since kindergarten. You know, when you know someone for a while and you've just always known them. So it's wonderful, and I'm honored to be invited.
That's what it feels like to me too. And like I said, time goes so fast because you have done 3 of my books as audiobooks.
Yes.
Open Secrets, Last Room at the Cliff's Edge, and
A House in the Woods.
Yes.
One of my all-time favorite books to read and to narrate. Unbelievable. Will there be a book 2?
It was one of my favorite ones to write too. I actually just started a new horror novel because I love the genre.
Yes.
So I'm very excited about that. But I'm here to talk about you.
Oh, yes.
And 2 things about you that I would like to tell people about. One is obviously your profession. I have an extremely high regard for what you do. People often, as an author, people will say, "Oh, are you going to read it yourself? Are you going to do the audiobook yourself?" They have no idea what's involved and how much work it takes and skill. So I'm going to start out by saying that what you do is highly skilled, and I have the utmost respect for it, and I'm not going to pursue it. But tell us how you got into audiobook narration.
Well, and a lot of us took the same route. I found out getting to know my fellow narrators. I was an actress. I trained as an actress. I had big dreams of Broadway and musical theater and the stage and the lights. And then life got in the way and bills. And fast forward, I was living in London. I was doing everything I could aside from my corporate job on weekends and evenings and showing up, acting, taking sick days so I could show up on set. And unless you're willing to devote your whole life and soul to being an actor, it's a hard enough gig for people that are full-time. It's not something you can do when you have too many other commitments, unless you're extraordinarily lucky. So I was losing hope. I used to. Towards the end, I would sit on my computer at this job that I hated more than anything on earth. And I would look at voiceover sites of audiobook narrators and their demos. And I would sit there just hating their guts. That's a horrible point to get to. Hating them. Because I could never do that, and how lucky they were and all those negative stories. And one day having listened to audiobooks my whole life, one day somebody told me, "Oh, you could do this. You could go and volunteer and audition and try to be an audiobook narrator." And I went to the Royal National Institute of the Blind and I auditioned. And I remember I walked out of that studio in 2013 and I called my friend. I was standing on the street and I screamed at the top of my lungs, "This is what I'm going to do for the rest of my life."
Oh,
I don't want to waste one more second of my entire life doing anything else. And that's from that point on, it's all I want to do. And I know you're supposed to be a balanced person, but really, I just want to narrate. And find a book. You find a book and throw yourself into the story. It's the best world. It's the best world for people that love it. Some people hate it.
Well, I'm that way with writing because I started writing when I was so young. I was a child, and I knew that that's what I wanted to do. You discovered this later in your life, but I know what it's like to say this is the one thing I truly want to do. Do you remember your first book, your audiobook that you did?
The first audiobook I did was for the Royal National Institute of the Blind, and it was The Days of Anna Madrigal.
Oh,
So
wow.
it was it was a great book to start with. And ironically, you don't get to listen to your books when you do them for the RNIB because they're only specifically, you have to have like the machine to listen to them. They're not on sale publicly.
Oh, okay.
They're specifically for people that are blind. And but I've heard clips of it, and weirdly, not knowing anything. I mean, I had acting training, years of that experience, but never having done an audiobook. I think in ways I was better than I am now 10 years later
Hmm.
because I had no inhibitions or self-consciousness. I was there purely to tell a story. I think sometimes, I don't know, do you find this as a writer? You want to learn, you're so eager to learn, and then the more you learn, you have everyone else's voice in your head about the way things should be. And sometimes I think it's a challenge to stay in touch with the way you think it should be.
I do know what you're talking about because for me it has to do with just a recent example is the M dash. If you know what an M dash is in
The whole
writing,
AI thing, they love it, don't they?
well, it uses it a lot for some
Yeah.
reason. There's M dashes all over AI stuff, but I have been using it for years, like long before there was AI, because I use it in place of a colon. Like it's I'm writing something and a semicolon is not appropriate. A colon doesn't really belong there, but I want to separate this part of a sentence. So I'll use an M dash. I've been doing it for a long time. And then somebody that I know and sort of respect as an English person said, he's like, M dashes, if it's automatically AI, if you see M dashes are horrible. So it made me very self-conscious about using M dashes. And so now when I'm writing, it's like, I won't use them. If I see them, I take them out. But it's kind of like what you said. It's like, why am I doing this? This is this is how I've been writing forever. I'm not AI. So if you have a problem with M dashes, it's not my problem. But it has made me very, very self-conscious about them.
Well, I have such strong feelings about that because all the people that are saying we have to stay purely human, we can't let AI and technology change us at all. So then you're supposed to stop doing something that your instinct told you to do
Mm-hmm.
so that you can clearly delineate that you aren't in reaction to AI. And I have to be honest, I feel that I use ChatGPT because it
Mm-hmm.
saved my health.
Yeah.
Saved my health. I had chronic fatigue syndrome and I couldn't get out of bed and I still was working, and I'm an entirely different person because of
Yeah.
ChatGPT. But the way I look at it is I use my common sense. All it is to me is a search engine filter feeding back my opinion to myself. And then I have to do due diligence. I went to the pharmacist with the list of supplements and said, "What do you think of this?" And then I used my common sense. But I think people are so scared they hear AI, they go running in the other direction. And as artists, if we only do what we do in reaction to what we're afraid of,
Mm-hmm.
our whole job is being brave, isn't it?
Yeah. Well, I'm really glad to hear you saying these things because as an author and also from the audiobook world, I know how much hostility there is toward AI, but I use ChatGPT. The one thing I will not do, and it has nothing to do with I'm too ethical, although I am too ethical, but I'm not going to write a short story. I'm not going to write fiction using AI. It's not going to write it for me because it has no soul. And
Exactly.
I can tell when I like, even if I say, write a little bit of the whatever, I've tried it. There's no soul. It doesn't know humor. It doesn't know these things that you only know if you're a human being in terms of writing and speaking. But I do use it for research because it saves me so much time.
Right.
5 years ago, what I would have done is I would have gone to Wikipedia. I would have looked at sources online, and I would have very painstakingly taken what was there and reworded it. And ChatGPT, it's just so much. It's a lot better than Google, by the way. But I do use it. It's a tool, and I have said for a long time now to people, it's a tool. And if you don't want me to use it, then you pay for a graphic artist for me. You pay for all these things that I cannot afford to do. I don't think that I should prevent myself from being creative and doing everything I can creatively because there are a million people out there who tell me that I'm working for the devil. I just don't accept that.
Yeah, and well, also I've been thinking a lot. I mean, you should always challenge yourself, right? So of course, I'm always, every time I go in the booth, I'm trying to be better. And not in that actor studio, I'm precious kind of way, but in a pushing myself to hit that spot. And when it happens, it's magic. When the writer has been brave and the writer has put something intangible on paper. And I know I love it. I can't say exactly why, because the words I give it wouldn't do it justice. I know I love it. So then I go in and try to channel the characters and create. Sometimes I can hit magic and the writer will hear it. You'll always know when you send it to the writer and they're like, that's it. The writer knows it. You know it. And sometimes you can't. And you can go to all the coaches in the world, which we all continually do, to try to bottle that magic. But they can't help you either because none of us know what that magic is. None of us. And I like to think that Elizabeth Gilbert says that if you have an idea and if you don't grab it, the idea doesn't belong to you. I'm probably misquoting her, but you get the general idea that the idea doesn't belong to you. Somebody else will grab the idea, that the idea is just floating around in the air. And I think it's our job to grab the ideas when we can, forge it, make it something even better, put it out there, and then somebody else grabs it. And to me, that's art. And to me, that's unknowable and unlearnable. And AI can't do that. Of course, AI can't do that. Yeah. But AI can give me the right supplements so I'm not stuck in bed with a headache. And AI can sort out my schedule. And AI can talk you down when somebody says something and you worry about it and you need to get to work and you don't want to think about the admin, right?
Or when I was writing this morning on my book, it takes place in Lambertville. I live here. I know the towpath. I know all this stuff. But I'm like, how long is the Lambertville towpath? I don't know. So I look it up, like ChatGPT, and it tells me it runs from here to there. And it's a very useful tool for that sort of thing.
Yeah. And now, if you go to Google, it's just going to tell you have cancer or a brain tumor or something. Oh, yeah. It's the lowest common denominator.
The one thing I do find creepy about it, but we are sophisticated enough as people and intellects to know that there's nobody there, is that the tone that it takes with me, like it's my friend. I don't really like that.
Yeah, that does get a little.
Yeah, I'm not going to get sucked into thinking that it's real, and that's the danger, especially for young people or vulnerable people who aren't able to say, this is not. There's nobody here. It's just talking to me this way. Now, I wanted to ask you about the relationship between you as a narrator and authors, because I've had quite a few audiobooks done. My approach, and I told somebody this, it's actually in this book that I just put out it's based on my workshops. When I find a narrator that works for me and that I want to work with, I'm very hands off. I don't want, because I accepted a long time ago that I'm never going to hear Kyle Callahan or Linda Sikorsky or any of my characters. I'm never going to hear them from another person the way they are in my head. And that's fine. I accept that. So I don't believe in burdening a narrator with a bunch of notes and re-recordings and I'm very hands off. Once we agree to do a book, unless it's a pronunciation like names, I'm doing a book for a client now, and she's got a bunch of Polish names in there and stuff like that. I totally am into know that I had to give guidance on that. But other than that, I just stay out of it. What do you think about that, and what's your experience?
I think all narrators go through different parts of the journey. When you're new, you're really eager to please. And it only takes a couple of writers. The problem is a lot of narrators start on ACX and a lot of
Yeah.
new writers start on ACX. And the relationship needs to be defined, but it's not defined. So the writer thinks that their job is to co-direct throughout the book, which
Right. Yeah.
when you're recording an audiobook, first of all, it breaks up your characters. Second of all, it shatters your self-esteem and takes away the ownership of what you're creating. And it's impossible to continue because you're in people-pleasing mode. So you're not able to embody the characters. And the writer is going to be disappointed because it will never sound the way the writer hears it in
Yeah.
their head. You're
Yeah,
very
that's
right
right.
about that.
Yeah.
So
Mhm.
what I do now, and they probably, I'm sure some people might be a bit put off by that, but that's great because that means that we've headed it off at the pass. In this job, it is a collaboration. And if the writer and the narrator are not on the same page, it can be painful. Because when you record a book, it's a lot of intense effort over a week, depending on how fast you record. And by the time you set this thing that you so lovingly created, thinking that you've honored the writer's voice, and you send it to them, if they come back with acting notes, it shatters you. And it's really technically difficult and not good for the book to be making a lot of edits to audio once you've done it.
Right.
So what I do is after you've been narrating as long as I have, you become very discerning about what your voice suits. And you're also not trying to get every job. You're trying to get the jobs that you're good at, because it doesn't serve you to. Every book has the right voice. And if you're not the right voice, it's not going to be a good experience. So, but even once the author likes the audition and gives me the offer, at the point of the 15-minute sample, I now have a list of questions I send, and they include pronunciations and anything important. And I say to the author, I will over communicate. I want every single thing you've got in your head about this book before I go in to do the sample.
Okay, yeah.
Then when I do the sample, I'm happy, and I say this up front, I'm more than happy to do a second sample. It's either 100% hell yes, excuse the language, not sure, or 100% no. If it's not a yes, it's a no. And I'll do a second sample, taking your feedback, see if we can get to that sweet spot. But after the second sample, I want you to be 100% happy that if the rest of this book is exactly like this, you will be 100% happy, because there's no acting notes, no changes, because my schedule, I finish a book, I'm supposed to have a day off between palate cleanse, but I usually don't. And I start the next book. I just don't have time. And I also, it's not good. It's not good for my health as a working professional to start to doubt my nuance. I have to go in as I'm the professional knowing what I'm doing. So if it works, it's magic. And the author knows that when they hear the 15-minute sample. But if the author hears it and they're, I like it, but, and then I send the second one, it still doesn't nail it. Guess what? You're not going to be happy with 8 hours of this, because it's going to be the same thing, isn't it? I'm the actor I am. I can only do the very best I can. I can interpret and take feedback, but I've done that with many, many, many projects over the last few years. And I now have almost always 100% happy writers at the end, like 100% happy, because the ones that aren't happy, we professionally agree to part ways. I don't have to be the voice for everyone.
No, and that's good to know because I've been working for over a year ghostwriting this memoir for a client. I'm ready to be done because it's just taken so long. But the audiobook, she wants to do an audiobook, and that's great. But I did say to her, I let her know that these are kind of my ground rules, and once we agree on a narrator, like I just told you at the beginning of this conversation, I'm not going to have Kim going, hearing it and going, oh, can she change this? That's not going to happen because I would never do that to you. Not you, but you know what I mean? I would never do that to a narrator.
Well, that's why you were always one of the writers. You were always easy to work with from the very beginning. And I was a new narrator. And I can't tell you, Mark, you were one of the first writers I worked with independently when I set up my home studio. And when you're new at this job, it's quite a scary. I think if anybody listening to this hasn't stood up or sat in a booth and faced a page by themselves, to even just speaking, you forget how to talk at first. I remember being new and you think, oh my God, I sound awful. Some new narrators go back, they try to remove every breath. They're so worried. And writers like you boosted my confidence. You reminded me in your communication that I was the actress I was. So going into your book, I felt good and strong about it. And it remained one of my favorite books from the very beginning because the way if you treat your narrator with that amount of respect, which you always do, you get a narrator that's professional and at their best. But if you micromanage them and don't trust them, that's what you're going to get in the read.
Now we are, I'm coming up on a closing. I want to ask you about living in London because, right now it's kind of crazy over here.
Yeah.
We're not leaving the country, but I have I have friends who moved to Spain. I have friends who moved to Brazil. And I'm curious about, and listeners, to imagine how you ended up in London.
My father was Italian, so my whole life it was which country are we going to live in, which, back and forth. My mother was American. So I always knew I was going to move to another country. And then I met my husband when I moved to LA, and he's from Scotland. And we spent like 10 years moving to different countries to see where we wanted to live. But every 3 months, I'd get bored and want to move. So we finally I always wanted to live in London, and we finally just ended up in London. And I think about what's going on there now because my husband would have been taken away. My father would have been one of those people taken away if we lived over there right now. I can't even imagine it. But I have to say, for anybody that is moving, the water's lovely over here. Come on in. It feels safe. It feels like home. But I've been here a very long time. And I'm just hoping soon America starts to feel safer.
I hope so too, because I'm at this point in my life, I'm not going anywhere.
Yeah.
But I do live in the New Jersey woods, so there's a certain distance, and I want to thank you for doing this with me today. Like I said, I looked back at which was Last Room at the Cliff's Edge. I think that's the first one, or was it?
I think that was the first one.
The first one. That was 2017.
Yep. You were one of my first. I started narrating in 2016.
So it's always a delight, and I know we stay in touch periodically for one thing or another. But I'm just so happy to interview you, and I'll be sharing this with people, and let them get a glimpse into the life of an audiobook narrator.
Thanks so much for inviting me, Mark. And thank you for having hired me as your narrator and for trusting me. And if you ever write another book like A House in the Woods, please, I want to throw my name in the hat as your narrator.
Okay. Thank you. And you have I know it's the afternoon over there, so you have a good one.
Thanks.
Welcome to a Twist Podcast exclusive. Bonus interviews where hosts Rick and Mark have intimate conversations with people you're sure to find as interesting as we do. Fasten your headphones and let's hit play.